prihaja gospod Klercq, strokovnjak za vseživljenjsko učenje in ambasador EPALE, e-platforme za izobraževanje odraslih v Evropi. Je član upravnega odbora Evropskega združenja za izobraževanje odraslih, svetovalec in podjetnik v izobraževanju, je lastnik podjetja Elephant Learning in Diversity, kar bi lahko prevedli kot slon se uči raznolikosti. Razvija in podpira več izobraževalnih projektov in z izobraževanjem odraslih se ukvarja že vrsto let, še posebej z usposabljanjem strokovnega osebja, o čemer bo danes tudi govoril. Predstavil nam bo še prednosti učenja v starejšem obdobju. Predstavitev bo v angleškem jeziku. Welcome, Mr. Klercq.
Thank you for this introduction. Dobro dan. It's a pleasure for me to be here, but I have to speak in English. But I will speak slowly. It's really a pleasure for me to be here because I'm many times on conferences where people are sitting, the walls are grey, people are listening but thinking about other things, and it's a little bit boring. And it's always nice to be here in Slovenia because at the beginning, if you enter already the room, you see something is going on. You see the colorful surrounding, you see there's always a little bit sun shining in Slovenia, even if it's dark and winter. And so it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the benefits of learning in later life and train the trainers, because that's something in which I have a lot of experience. And when I was preparing this presentation, I realized that we have to do, and I'm coming in the same direction as Andragoški was telling, we live in a paradigm shift. And I call it the illusion of attention, because when I started in adult education, I was a young boy, and I started with working with nurses for the elderly. And in that time, there was no attention for education of the elderly. There was no idea about learning in later life. Now, so many years later, there is maybe much more attention for learning in later life. But the question is, what has it brought us? The other thing is that when I started 25 years old as a trainer, I saw things from a different perspective. Nowadays I'm almost 65, so 40 years later, and you see things all again with another perspective. And I think it's important what Jacques Delors sometimes said, learn to know is one thing, but learn to do is another thing. We have to make action out of what we learned. More important is learn to be. And maybe the most important thing is learn to live together. Because we are different people, individuals, different cultural backgrounds, maybe different languages, and we have to do it all together. Well, I was already a little bit introduced, so I make this short, but you can see I started in 1978 in a Dutch folk high school, and I'm in the middle of my career. I started my own company, the Elephant Learning in Diversity, and nowadays I'm also working for the digital platform EPALE. The other way around. Wait a moment. So there were some things in between, and I was always involved in a lot of European projects. I'm also a board member of the Dutch organization Learn for Life, which is organizing the Dutch Festival of Adult Learning. And at this moment, the topics which I'm working on are more or less these one: learning in later life, intergenerational learning, living in digital world, integration and social inclusion, and entrepreneurship and self-employment. In 1993, it was the European Year of the Elderly, then I started my international work. I was asked by the Dutch and the German ministry to organize a conference about the aging society and the role of education in it. It was the European Year of the Elderly, and we started the European Network, EEN. I wrote a book talking about generations in 1995. And in 1999, again, a UN year about older persons and intergenerational solidarity. And in that year we started a more international organization, ICIP, International Consortium for Intergenerational Programs. It was, what you can say, a kind of pioneering phase in which, from no attention to more attention, a lot of things happened in the Netherlands, in other countries, in Europe and in the whole world. In 2003, it was the time of the lifelong learning program from the European Union. We started the Grundtvig Network program, PVT, Pan-European Forum for Education and the Elderly. And in that project, 16 countries were involved, and it was really a time that we implemented new ideas about learning in later life in different countries, starting from totally different points. It was also in that time that I was in Slovenia, and I come back to that point later. 2012, again a European year about active aging, another Grundtvig network was started, 4H. And 4H, it's still available as a website, is more or less a one-stop shop for education in later life. You can find there different kinds of documents, different kinds of good practices from different countries. In this project also a lot of countries were involved. And you can say 4H was more or less the end of a period in which we have connected a lot of organizations with each other and collect a lot of material, and now it's more time for further multiplication. One of the things which I'm doing each year again is giving an international trainer-to-trainer seminar on learning in later life in Cyprus. And also this year in October we will start again with a group of people coming from different countries. And we did do it now for 10 years, I think, and we had 350 people there from complete different backgrounds, people working in the practice in trade unions, people working in homes for the elderly, but also professors of universities, teachers in schools and whatever. And the nice thing of such a seminar is always that you learn from each other because of these different kinds of backgrounds, and also because the practice in countries is different. So, if I reflect a little bit about what I do, there are a lot of experiences. In the Netherlands, I was more or less a witness and active in several initiatives of self-organizations in the 80s of the last century. I was in East Germany after the Wende and helped to set up a Verein voor Voorruhestand. That is an association for pre-retired people. I was in Slovenia and we discussed the success of pre-retirement education in the Netherlands. You know, Anna. And we also talked about the start of the University of the Third Age in Slovenia, which is, I think, a real good success. And another good thing is, what I learned from you here in Slovenia, is that adult education should really be built up from the communities. As far as there is this link, there is a strong education going on. I was in Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and also there started a lot of U2EAs. In Romania and Bulgaria, we met people who say, no, our government is not interested at all in learning for later life, but later on things happened and they got more and more interested. The same in Poland and the Baltic states. At the beginning, no provision, no attention, and nowadays they are also starting new initiatives. I was also in Russia, where we saw mixed community initiatives, project 2003, in five different places, and 4 of these places have still continuing projects which was started then. And I was in the USA, and there I discovered the whole practice and the variety of intergenerational learning. Later on, last years, I was in the Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, and there we see also new initiatives going on. So in a way, a lot of things have happened, and new things are going on, and sometimes people in different countries are starting again from a certain point of beginning. But the starting points are not always the same. I made a little bit of comparison. West Europe, you see elder people are more or less inactive in the society. Elderly were separated and less integrated in society. Elderly people were isolated. Elderly were seen as unproductive. And care was provided mostly by the state. In the East Europe, you saw elderly people were still active. Elderly were not separated and more integrated in society. Elderly were part of society and not excluded. Elderly people were seen as and respected as veterans and as seniors. And care was mostly maintained by family. So in a way, East and West has learned a lot from each other, I think, in the past. And what we have in common is that elderly are active and self-reliable as long as possible. They should participate in society and living in supportive communities. And maybe the most important things are values as respect, dignity, privileges, and unfulfilled dreams and ambitions. Come back on that later too. A lot of good practice can be shown, and I'm not going to mention them all, but I just show the pictures. And I can talk about a lot of success factors. Self-initiatives of the elderly, professional support, no institutional colonization. I mean that no organizations are claiming that they are the best knowing for what is good for all the people. But cooperation between generations and involvement and support from local authorities. I think that are the 5 main success factors. And here I can stop my presentation. Why should I? There's more to say. Because if we talk about getting older and the benefits of learning, then we talk about an adventure. We talk about challenges. We talk about chances. We talk about the past, and the present and the future. And we should realize that the past gives a future to the present. It is connected. And we should also realize that present is a special word with a special meaning, because it is present, it is a present for you, for me, for all of us. That's what we should learn from. We should learn by the day, learn from this moment. We should also remember the child in ourselves, and we should be aware of the older person which we can become. It are 2 opposites in ourselves. They are always there from the beginning, as child and also as an older person. That brings me to the question, when are you old? And what does this word mean to us? You can see the ages are going fastly and fastly. It started 65, now it's 55, now it's 50, and I think we talk about already people of being older or getting older at 45, because 45 you lose your job. It's very hard to find another job. So in a way, the speediness of aging has something difficult. What can image say to us? I told you I started in a period no attention for education of older people. And it was also a time that there were only negative people, negative images, stereotypes about older people. They were frail and vulnerable. This kind of images were dominating in the past. And nowadays, go to Google and you will see on later life, on aging, on older people, on elderly, on frail elderly, complete other pictures. Lively, vital people, active, more or less like this. So in a way, the whole idea of the old people have changed in the idea of very vital people, like we saw here on the stage. This is a kind of revolution in itself. But we should be careful with that. Once when I taught the nurses, a nurse came to me and told me that she met a man who was sitting on a bench and he didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to sit there. And she said to me, I tried to push him, I tried to activate him, I tried to stimulate him to do some things. But he said no, and he stayed where he was. What to do? I asked her, did you ask him why he was sitting there? No. I said, okay, maybe you should go back and you should talk with him and ask why he is sitting each day on this bench and what does it matter to him. And she did, and then the man was telling his story in a way that he told her, I don't want to do anything more. I have done so much in my life. Now it's time for me to reflect, to think about what has happened with me, what I have done, what others have done with me, and what I have done with others did to me. So she learned activating is not the main thing, it's much more about what is important for people. What can we learn out of this? I think the focus for tutors is again these values. You should respect an older person in what he is or what she is and what she does. You should give dignity to them. You should look what kind of privileges they have or claim or want to have. And maybe more important, you should ask them what are their unfulfilled dreams and ambitions. Because as long as people have unfulfilled dreams, there is a life going on. We also can learn that only caring for older people is not the answer. Also empower them is also not the answer. Activating them sometimes, but also not. I think it's much more about competence development, because people have to develop themselves in their life, and that is a never-ending story. And the more you develop yourself, the more you can share your personal growth with other people. And you can transfer knowledge. It's also a lot of changing in life. Some people talk about the 3 boxes of life. As you are young, you have to learn. If you are adults, you are going to work. And after the working period, if you are retiring, then it's time to have some leisure time. But this is not longer the case. Nowadays we have lifelong learning, we have lifelong working, and we have lifelong leisuring, all together, all in one. Maybe too much, but it is there. It's one life, and that's a big change. Learning in later life is not only about getting older and aging and what to do in that period of your life. No, it is realizing that you are living and learning in an intergenerational context. That was what I learned from the Americans. We are living in a multi-generational society. In this society, not longer live 3 generations together, but much more than 3 generations. And you see the generations are coming and going. I told you I wrote a book talking about my generation, and in this book we were talking about what makes us a generation, what are characteristics from a generation. And maybe you have noticed it in papers and magazines. There are a lot of stereotypes of different generations, like you can see here. Veteran generation, the baby boomers, generation 10 born after 1966, and the millennials. It are some examples of characteristics of generations. But let's go a little bit deeper into that. If we talk about a generation is always limited in time and space. Mostly it is a cohort, 10 years, born in a certain decade. They're sharing a certain history, they share a certain life, and sometimes they share a certain lifestyle as well, like you can see in fashion, in music. And that means they share also common feelings and ideals. There are also distinctive differences with the earlier and the following generation. It's not always a generation gap, but you can see there are changes going on. And what you can see is there's also something what I call specific learning, crystallized intelligence for each generation. Thinking about a multi-generational society means also other questions which are raising. What does it mean for you to live in a society with so many generations? Who do you meet and who do you rarely meet? What is your reference? How do you deal with your daughter who is living a complete different life like you do? And what are you going to do if your grandchildren will come to you and say, Granddad, do you pass your exam for university? Yes, of course. But you don't have a chip in your head, isn't it? No, I haven't. But Granddad, then it's impossible to pass an exam. Could be future. I mean, it are different other questions to consider. And you should realize what is your reference. Is it family life? Is that the most important thing? Or are it the media who are saying a lot and who are influencing a lot of our life? Or is it the experience which we share with other people? Is that a reference? Experience which we share with people from different generations? Questions. In the United States, they think in a way a little bit simple about intergenerational learning. They say, okay, young people and elder people, you can bring them together because they have the same kind of things and it will match together. Which is true, in a way. Young people need attention and care, are seen as too young too, looking to the future without knowledge of the past. They want to know, they want to show, they are curious and ambitious, and they have a big self-esteem. And elderly people, They need attention and care. They are seen as too old for. They look to the future from the past. They want to tell. They want to look at. They are cautious and careful. And they have, so to say, sometimes a small self-esteem. So bring them together, link them together, organize activities, and they learn together. That's possible, that's good. But I think living in an intergenerational society is more than only young and old together. It is learning from different generations and the changes which are in between. For instance, look to this picture. You can see that, in fact, if you see these generations, each cohort is also going parallel to different kind of technological innovations. The coming of the telephone, the car, television, computer, internet, social media, and I think the future is artificial intelligence. And in a way, some people like me started without a computer, but we have to live with the computer now. We cannot live without it any longer. But the generation behind me does only know the computer and does not know about the first car or the first television. So some experiences are disappearing and others are appearing. And this is something what you have to realize if you are talking about training people, tutoring people, learning of later life. It is not teaching, but it is much more walking and talking together, joining experiences, finding consistency and mutual learning, and being practical, applicable. Ask the elders what they want. Be open for other ideas and opinions than you expect from older people. And ask concrete questions, join their life community. Be close. It's not about discussions and debates. It's about dialogue, interactive, having contact with each other, even in a digital world. And maybe you can learn a little bit from this idea from a Belgian professor, Walter Leerman, who say you can be as teacher and expert, who has knowledge. You can be an engineer who is focused on the functional and technical instrumental processes. You can teach like a prophet, which has a message to tell people. Or you are teaching as a moderator, facilitator, a dialogue. And maybe most important is that you have from all of these types something, and especially that you have something which can be as playful learning, like using the theater, like using play, like using creativity, and you have it here. These are still things which also are coming out of this International Train-the-Trainer seminar. When I'm 64 and I'm still trainer, new questions are raising. Is fit for life is important, but is it also a neglection of aging? Crystallized knowledge versus artificial knowledge. Computers and robots can take over a lot of practical things. But it's very important that we should save the knowledge in our heads, in our mind. And because they can direct us the way how to deal with modern technology? Is it use it or lose it? And is it sharing and transferring? And what about the poor, the frail, and the vulnerable? Are all older people vital as long as they live? I guess no. But that is what the magazines are showing us at this moment. So the question is, what is happening really with if you are poor, frail, and vulnerable? Is it still visible in society, or don't we want to see it? And what about at the end of life? Maybe sitting on a bench, rethinking your life, considering your life, thinking what you have done. Maybe it's losing, because at the end we all lose. Maybe we have to see it also as a meaningful process, which belongs to life. And at the end of my presentation, how to be a trainer and a teacher in this new century. Is it this one, using all the social media, the gadgets, the apps, whatever? Or is it this, having some discipline to go into depth, making synthesis to breath, being creative to stretch everything, and along with respectful and ethical in the future. I think these are important competences for trainers in the future. And not only for trainers, it's about ourselves as human beings as well, because trainers are not separate from being a human being. And for me, the most important thing, what I have learned in life, is that life is a concert, but we never know the program. Thank you.